get stuck. I mean, I felt stuck when I first moved to Atlanta. I wanted to do some different things. Get with somebody and get with a group of people, do a meetup, create something that you're just getting together with people that are like-minded and get yourself kick-started and then be accountable to them. And before you know it, you start transitioning and you start recreating yourself as a new person. I think that's a great way, but get with some folks that are like-minded and get yourself going and don't wait. Do it.
Welcome to Star of the Doubts. I'm your host, Jared Easley. Our co-host today is Kamanzi Constable from KamanziConstable.com. How you doing, Kamanzi?
I am great. I'm enjoying the sun of Maui.
As you should be. And since you're enjoying Hawaii, man, that makes me think of when I used to live in Hawaii. I was actually in the Navy. And guess what? This episode's coming out on Veterans Day. And we talked about this. We want to have on the show someone who's a veteran, someone who's doing big things. And that person is Bill Nowicki. Bill Nowicki is a Cold War veteran. He's a former submariner. He's the podcaster and host of the Submarine Sea Stories show over at nowickimedia.com. That's Nowicki media.com. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be on.
All right, Bill. So we're laughing because we tried to do this intro a few minutes ago, and I forgot to hit record. So this is our second time doing this. So Bill's an absolute professional. Thank you for that. Bill, you already know this is coming. What is the best concert that you've ever been to?
Well, I happen to be in Peru, a place called Chachapoyas. You know I got to tell a story. So we had taken a 20-hour bus ride. It's a long story, but 20-hour bus ride to this place. It's the actual capital of the Amazonas region in Peru. And we had arrived and we checked into our hotel. And one of the big things that I love about Peru is the music. And I asked the guy at the front desk of the hotel, do you know anyone that plays local folks that play music? And he said, sure. And he's making some phone calls and all this stuff's going on. Well, long story short, guy shows up with a guitar. And the guy that owns the place gave us an impromptu 1-hour concert. And he sang all these beautiful Spanish love songs. And it was an outdoor kind of area. And it was just a beautiful night. The music was beautiful, and it was just so surprising. And it was one of those times where you could never get all the things to align themselves again. But it was just one of those times where I just look back and said, man, that was great. It was just terrific.
That's incredible. Do you have any pictures from that?
I probably do. I got a video I took, but I'd have to dig it up. But yeah.
Good deal. So we mentioned in the intro that you are a former submariner, but as you know, submariners for life, I guess, right?
That's right.
So we got a couple of terms that are very common for the submariner community. So we're going to ask you a couple of these terms, and then if you'd be willing to maybe give a short explanation on what that term means. And go ahead, Kamanzi, if you'd kick us off.
Let's go with angles and dangies.
Angles
and dangles.
Angles and dangles. There you go.
Yes.
That's an L.
Yes. That's a great one. When you are first fitted out and you go out to sea, one of the things they do to test the boat, all the components and parts, is to go up at a really high angle and then come down at a really high angle. And it does a lot of things. It pushes the boat's limits. It's almost like riding a roller coaster. And so you take all these sharp angles to test the boat out, and you can also go left and right and port, starboard, that kind of stuff. But that's a way for the boat to get stressed and test to make sure it works. Now, I don't want to know what happens when it doesn't work, but every time I was on and did those angles and dangles, it worked. So it worked out for me.
All right, the next term that some of our listeners may have heard of, but they just don't know what it means. What is an A-ganger?
A-gangers. Oh, Lord. They're the dirtiest, nastiest people on board. No, I'm just kidding. We used to call them, well, I can't say it, but they used to work on all the valves that use the bathroom. You know, we have to flush the toilet and stuff. Was a little bit different. They have ball valves, and if any of those leaked, they'd have to fix them. So they had that. They had the diesels. They had all this auxiliary equipment. So A stands for auxiliary equipment operators, A-gangers. But they were kind of a rough crowd, if you ask me. A lot of hair on their arms, if I recall correctly.
Then we're going to kick it off with the next term, Bill, which is Bravo Zulu.
Bravo Zulu. Well, back in the old days of the Navy, they used to have flags that they used to communicate back and forth between ships at sea. And of course, it didn't apply in the submarine service. But if you had two flags, B, which is Bravo in the Navy, and Z, which is Zulu, if you had those two flags up, that meant you did a great job, whether you sunk another ship or did whatever you're supposed to do. So BZ means great job in Navy lingo.
Bravo Zulu on answering that question.
Thank you,
Bill.
sir.
Okay, the next one.
I got 100%. I think.
Yeah, so far so good. So the next one is bubblehead. What is a bubblehead? Not bobblehead, but bubblehead.
Bubbleheads are guys are in the Navy or in the submarine service. They're called bubbleheads. Because I guess we used to put bubble suits on and things to try to escape or whatever. I don't know where. I guess it's just that because we're underwater in a bubble, probably.
Next term is bunkie.
Bunkie. I don't know if I know this one. Is this when you're hot racking? Is that it, Jarrett?
That's exactly
all right.
Yeah.
So when you go out to sea, there's sometimes not all the racks you need for all the crew that you have. So
what's a rack?
A rack is the place you go to sleep. That's a bed. Okay. So
all right.
If you're hot racking, your bunkie is the guy that takes your place when you get out. And just a quick story there. When you're out at sea and you're hot racking, you have your own stuff and you separate it and you replace the sheets every time you swap it out. And then after about 4 or 5 days of not getting enough sleep, you say the hell with it and you jump right in. So that's not pleasant, but that's reality.
That's funny. All right, the next one is a term that I knew well, crank.
Oh, yeah, I never did have to crank, but it's called mess cranking. So when you first show up on the boat, and like for me, I had a job right away. I had to be qualified, so they put me right on that job. But if you're brand new to the boat and you don't have one of those watch standing jobs right away, they put you in the crew's mess. You peel potatoes, wash pots, take all the trash, compact it, pump it out of the bottom of the sub, TDU, it's called. You do all that fun stuff that no one wants to do, and they call it mess cranking.
Yeah, not the most glamorous opportunity.
Well, the next word, Bill, is dink.
Dink. Oh, no, that's when you're delinquent and your qualification. So you pretty much start out dink. Isn't that right, Jared? So
everybody's dink in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they give you this long list of things you have to do. You have to learn all these different systems. You have to do all these watch stations. And then they say, get qualified, dink. And basically, you have to read all this stuff. You have to go visit with all these guys, and they test you on your knowledge of all these systems. And if you do enough of that, and then you stand enough under instruction watch, then you can be qualified, and you're no longer dink. So you can watch a movie here and there.
All right. I'm laughing because I can relate to a lot of these terms. Yes. All right, here's one. We only got 2 more. This is an interesting one, and I happen to know what this is. Grottweiler.
Grottweiler? I've never heard of that my whole time.
You don't know what Grottweiler is?
No, sir.
Okay, so the basic enlisted submarine school is in where? Where is that located?
Well, it was in Groton, Connecticut.
Okay, I believe it still is. Is it not? Is it not in Groton?
I think it might be.
Okay. Well, the Groton, right or wrong, is not known as being a town full of beautiful women. So some of the terms that the Navy men call the local women is Grottweiler, right or wrong.
Oh, Lord.
Which, I guess that's kind of rude.
We're going down on this episode.
All right, fair enough. Angles and dangles and not cut down.
So, Bill, the last term is scuttlebutt.
Scuttlebutt. That's a term which means what is the rumors aboard the boat usually. But scuttlebutt used to be, back in the old days of wooden ships and iron men, were a place where you used to get water and a water fountain. So everybody would hang out there and shoot the bull and say what all the rumors are. So that's where the name scuttlebutt came from.
All right, so Bill, let's move on. I love movies, and I've been guilty of watching some really good submarine movies. So what is your favorite submarine movie?
Absolute favorite is Das Boot. Some people say Das Boot, but it's Das Boot, I think. But yeah, I love that movie.
Definitely a classic.
That's one of those movies, like, I had trouble breathing watching that damn movie. It's like,
Kamanzi, do you have a favorite sub movie?
The Hunt for Red October. Right? That's a good one.
I watched U571 recently. That was pretty cool. And K9's a little bit crazy, too. Or no, Widowmaker, sorry.
Oh,
not
right.
K9. K19, yeah.
Well, Bill, let me ask you, before I ask you the next question, and this is something I'm curious, and maybe the listeners will be curious, what's the food like on a submarine?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the person preparing it, but I didn't really get that much out of our food. And I'll tell you, we were out at sea 74 days, and the conversations quickly, well, not quickly, about day 60 started becoming about a fresh salad. And for whatever reason, we focused on the salad bar at Wendy's. And because you miss fresh stuff, and, no matter how good your refrigeration is, you're going to run out of lettuce and tomatoes and all that stuff. And so we talked about tomatoes and lettuce for a lot, last 2 weeks on board that damn thing.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So then, Bill,
but to answer your question, sometimes it's pretty good though. Like but you have a budget, so you might get steaks and lobsters once or twice out at sea, but a lot of it is casseroles and stuff like that. Go ahead, next question.
Sure. So next question, and thank you for that, by the way. Yeah, that would be interesting, being in a sub for like 70 days, and yeah, that's going to take some mental capacity to be able to do that. So, Bill, do you have a favorite swim call story?
Oh, yeah. Well, I only had one my whole career.
Interesting.
Yeah, we were transiting, I think, from St. Thomas or St. Croix to, somewhere, Puerto Rico or something. And they called swim call, and I was dead asleep in my rack. Within, I want to say 30 seconds, I was under the forward escape trunk. I was the first guy there. And we, there's water in between, up in that cavity, so you have to drain it. So we have the drain open, and the captain already called swim call, and you only have so much time. And we're waiting, the thing's draining, and the chief of the boat said, I think it's really empty, Nowicki. Let's open it up. So we pushed the hatch open, and 30 gallons of water fell down. Got into the machinery room, and all these guys are cleaning it up really fast so we didn't get in trouble. And then we went up, and it was just a gorgeous day, and it was kind of a little rough seas. So you would jump off the side, and sometimes it was 5 feet down, and sometimes it was 25 feet, depending on where the crest of the wave was. And then you had to swim to keep up with the boat that was kind of moving. But it was really cool. And we had a guy up in the sail with a submachine gun to shoot sharks just in case he saw them. But it was fun. Wow. And one guy said, this is how, we don't have a clue, half the guys on that boat, but the one guy says, hey, man, I can see the bottom, And I remember seeing the depth gauge. It was 5,800 feet. So it was a mile deep. I said, I don't think you see the bottom, man.
Wow.
A mile deep.
So literally everybody's just on top of the submarine, just jumping off into the open ocean.
And then we had those rope ladder things to get up. And some of the guys were so weak, they couldn't pull themselves up. We had to have divers pushing their butts up, sides and stuff. But it was a great time. It was one of the best times because it was one of those things you weren't expecting. And it was a beautiful day. And everybody was just we were all like kids for about 30 minutes.
So Veterans Day, that's why we're doing this episode. So, Bill, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
Well, I look and I see the kids nowadays and the kinds of things they're going through, especially the ones in the Army and Afghanistan and Iraq, and just the amount of stress they're under. And, it's just amazing to me that we have an all-volunteer force, and yet they're such good kids who are respectful of our country, and they've put themselves out there. And a lot of them come back needing help and, having issues. And, when you're in the military, and you'll probably agree to this, Jared, is you have a network of people around you that you can depend on. And then when you're out in the civilian world, it's a great big ocean of people, not pun intended there, but just a large group of people that it's hard to reestablish yourself outside the armed forces. So that's been a real difficult thing for folks. And there's probably 700,000 guys. I looked at some data not long ago, but there's 700,000 guys they're going to be cut from the military in the next couple of years. So all those guys really need help. And, just a pat on the back is probably good, but some of them I know need a lot more help than that.
So, Bill, you shared one really good story with us. Looking back at your experience as a submariner, could you share maybe another really good story, some of your best times at sea?
Yeah, well, let me think. We ran out of food. I said I was underwater for 74 days. Well, we had left Norfolk and we went on one of these missions I can't talk about, but bottom line is we were under the polar ice cap. We went different places, and part of our mission was just to basically stay on station. So we were getting, information from the highest levels of the government to remain on station. Well, turns out the backstory is the supply officer was fairly new at these type of deployments, and he hadn't ordered enough food. And we didn't figure that out until about day 50 or so. And we were only supposed to be out 60 days, and we got extended another 2 weeks. So we were on one meal a day for about 2 weeks. And I don't know, this is one of those times where it's just the light bulb goes on. But I had never been poor my entire life. I mean, we always had food on the table, but it's one thing to go to bed when your stomach's growling. And I never want to go through that again, I can tell you. But it was one of those times where I had no control. I had no anything. But what's funny, the funny part of that story is I had stashed away some of this, those old pistachios that had the red covering on them. I don't know what the hell that was, but I had a case of those that I snuck away. And I had a can I would open in my rack and I would eat them. And I remember coming out of my rack one time and my face was all red from that pistachio stuff. And somebody saw me and he said, "Bill, you got something to eat?" I said, "No, I don't have anything to eat, but I lied. I didn't care. I was starving to death." But we made it. I mean, it was tough, but we made it. In fact, I interviewed my old CO that was the CO of that boat, and he was surprised that no one complained. He said no one ever said anything to the command or anything, and he never got in trouble as a result, but he was quite sure it was going to happen.
Bill, so obviously this show is called Starve the Doubts, and it's no secret that being a submariner is not an easy job. So how did you starve the doubts during some of the difficult seasons of your military experience?
The military was one of these positive, negative things for me. Being out at sea for that long and missing family and sunlight and all that stuff. But what I learned was I had so much more to give, and I had a lot of time really putting an effort out to see what I could do. So before that time, I was scooping ice cream at Friendly's in Massachusetts. So I didn't have a whole bunch going for me. And then when I got in the Navy, I saw that, hey, I could learn about nuclear power. I could operate a nuclear plant. I was having troubles. They wouldn't even let me operate the grill at the Friendly's. I mean, they didn't trust me to do that. And here's the Navy trusting me to drive this $2 billion submarine. So I started seeing myself differently. So my doubts really got starved because I started seeing some changes that really were paying off in my life. And I started applying that same thought process throughout my life from that point on. So I went to college, got my degree in electrical engineering, took some jobs that, I ended up being a manager, had like 67 people working for me. But all that was kind of because I was willing to take a chance. And recently, and you and I both know Marone Berekit, but before that, I got with a coach when I first moved to Atlanta, and we started going through some things that I was really wanting to do in my life, additional things that I had not tried before. And the podcasting started popping up because I love podcasts, and I started looking at some different things. And then I got with Marone and started, creating this whole Submarine Sea Stories podcast, and then connecting with some of the guys I had been out at sea with and getting them to agree to be on my show. And it was amazing once I got past that part, but I needed help. I mean, I needed a coach, and then Marone really helped, and the podcast incubator family's been really instrumental in that. But once I got through that, it was like I was a whole new world had opened up. I mean, just to be on your show and be able to go to Podcast Movement and meet all those great folks was all because I was willing to take a chance and just try something new. As a 53-year-old guy, that's what life's all about, is just keep pushing yourself and see what happens. If it doesn't work, like Marone says, screw it, just do something else.
So, Bill, let me ask you, why podcasting?
Well, I love podcasting. I love storytelling. I mean, I listen to it every week. And, when I listen to stories, I can transport myself. And another quick story, when I was out at sea, I had never read a book. I mean, I was one of these kids in grammar school that used to read a comic book and do a book report on it. And hopefully the teacher wouldn't figure it out. I mean, I was pretty lazy. But when I went out at sea, I read books about the great outdoors and just, I could picture all the great big elm trees that Fenimore Cooper novels talked about and, all the stories surrounding that. And it opened up a whole new world for me. And that's when I started listening to podcasts, did the same thing. And I could it was almost like I was transported and I would come back when the story was done and I didn't know what had happened the last 25 minutes, So I feel that storytelling is just such an integral part of what makes us human. And I think I really resonate with storytelling. And when I do this podcast, listening to people tell me their submarine stories just transports me. And I just love it. I don't know why. It's just a part of me now that I don't know if I could do without it anymore.
Bill, what's your best advice for fellow podcasters?
Just do it. My first episode, and I'm sure you'd say the same thing, both you guys, but the first one is it's a slog. You go through it, you get through it, and it's like, man, I'm glad that's over. And then you have to edit it. And it's like, holy crap, I'll never do this again. Then you do the next one. And over time, it just becomes like second nature to you. But it's just do it and do it regularly. Don't put it off. And over time, it really becomes something where one of the things my coach that I wrote down that I'm still working on is just finding your voice. And over time, that's what happens is you find your voice, you get your traction, you get around like-minded people, and pretty soon you're off and running, and podcasts just become something that you do and is part of your life. And I just love, you know what it's like. You got 1,000 people, 1,200 people a week listening to you. It's pretty crazy, but I think it's great. And all the feedback you get, and a lot of guys told me, oh, gosh, you reminded me of what it was like. And it helps them to reminisce. And, it's just something I love to do.
Hey, Bill, who's doing something that interests you right now?
There's a bunch of them, bunch of folks. But, I really love, I'm trying to remember the name of the podcast, but Startup. It's the podcast that's the guy from NPR that's trying to start a business with podcasting, and to listen to him. What I love about it, and I told Brian Orr this, I said, if you can bring someone along with you as you're learning and let them hear the struggles, then it makes it more real to you. If you ask, you're talking to me now. If you would have talked to me 5 months ago, I would have said, hell, I don't know what I'm doing. But now 6 months or 5 months later, I feel like I'm starting to become a podcaster and I find my voice. But it's great to be able to follow as someone struggles, and then you can relate better to that person. And then it makes it look like, well, hell, I can be a podcaster too. And I think it's just a great way to, get yourself out there and put yourself out there, because over time, it really brings out to you what's you. When you're podcasting, that's pretty much you. You can't fake it every week,
Bill, so we're going to start wrapping up here. So what's the best place for the listeners to stay connected with you online?
Right. Well, you already brought up Wikimedia.com. That's for my podcast, but I've recently started transitioningvets.com, and I have a free ebook for folks, 6 mistakes that vets make when they're transitioning from the military. Just go to that website and download it for free. And I'm looking to put together a network of folks that help vets transition from the military to civilian life. And, being a manager and a coach, I can really apply some of the skills I learned and hopefully, help just a few folks, and that would make it all worth it. But yeah, transitioningvets.com would be a great way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Bill.
And then, Bill, first of all, thank you so much for your service. And then the question is, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
I just want to say, Jared and Kamanzi, I just love podcasts, and you guys have been such great. I've listened to your stuff, both you guys' stuff, and it really helps me, and I appreciate all you do. And Jared, podcast movement was something that my wife's cousin said, Bill, you got to go. You're really passionate about this stuff. So I took a chance and went, and I just had the best time. And I look forward to many more of them for the years to come, hopefully.
Hey, Bill, if there's someone out here who's listening that says, hey, on some level, I want to try to help transitioning vets, is there anything that they can do?
Yeah, I just think folks need a little bit of assistance. So, when you get stuck, I mean, I felt stuck when I first moved to Atlanta. I wanted to do some different things. Get with somebody and get with a group of people, do a meetup, create something that you're just getting together with people that are like-minded and get yourself kick-started and then be accountable to them. And before you know it, you start transitioning and you start recreating yourself as a new person. I think that's a great way. But get with some folks that are like-minded and get yourself going and don't wait. Do it.
So that's advice for the person that's transitioning out of the military?
Yes.
Good deal. Well, Bill, again, like Kamanzi said, we appreciate your service and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Jared. It was so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. When you're in the military and you have a network of people around you that you can depend on. And then when you're out in the civilian world, it's a great big ocean of people, but just a large group of people that it's hard to reestablish yourself outside the armed forces. So that's been a real difficult thing for folks. And I mean, there's probably 700,000 guys that are going to be cut from the military in the next couple of years. So all those guys really need help. And just a pat on the back is probably good, but some of them I know need a lot more help than that.